Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Umbrella Academy Season 4, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the opening of the episode, which involves Jennifer. I don't know if that was her being born or what her circumstances are, because she was already like a little girl. It's not like she was a baby that came out of that squid. She was already like maybe a preteen. Who knows? But it's like she was old enough. So, because the question comes up that they're like, well, the immediate assumption is, well, if Jennifer's special, it might mean that she's one of them. Wouldn't be the first secret sibling they came across. So, but Reginald later on describes her as the opposite of them. Like, obviously, she's stronger than all of them and connected. Because my theory previously is like, well, she has to be the cleanse itself, right? She's a personification of it. But I don't know if that's the case, because we don't know what her powers really are. But it seems like she is supposed to be the cleanse because the genes refer to her as kind of the person who can restore the original timeline and everything, right? So I don't know what that necessarily, like, is she able to melt away the other timelines and stuff like how will she go about cleansing everything? When I guess you could make the argument you thought like the universe getting a reset would have been the cleanse, but I guess because of everybody kind of getting what they want out of this timeline to some extent, kind of like screwed it up for everyone else. So like, this timeline maybe was supposed to go back to the original timeline reset, but once again, everyone's kind of making their modifications to get the universe they wanted back. I mean, that was more so in Reginald and Allison, but still. So I don't know if that's what kind of threw a wrench in all of this. We don't know everything that Reginald was kind of putting into the computer and stuff like that when they were resetting the universe. So there's that aspect of it. It's still unclear what Jennifer's circumstances are even at the end of this episode. But anyway, let's kind of break things down further, where it wouldn't be the Umbrella Academy if there wasn't some family fallout. And I figured as much. I knew Klaus he'd be pissed at his entire family, but he'd resent Allison the most because it's like, you went against my wishes. And it ends up being this interesting relationship and dynamic. I mean, it almost feels like because Allison didn't have the cycle of a complicated relationship that her and Victor have had over the years, it almost feels like you replaced Victor with, like, you needed a project. You needed to be the better, more superior sibling in so many ways. And it's like you found another sibling to kind of like fill that void, and it's like, I was the broken mess. So by focusing on my BS, you didn't have to focus on your own. We end up finding out, the reason why we haven't seen Ray is because Ray has left. So I don't know if Claire gets to see him from time to time or what, but it's like, oh, interesting. And I'm like, do the rest of the family know that or not? Because I don't know if that was the first time they've heard of it. Because they brought up the whole wasn't it last episode Luther was like, somebody was talking about the fact is that she's got Claire and Ray. So I'd assume like not everyone knew. I guess only Klaus knew and just was keeping that his entire time. But it's like, I was more so there for Claire than you were, because you were so busy like trying your terrible best at your career. I mean, to be fair, Klaus went ripping into his entire family. Is like, daddy issues, mommy issues, daddy issues, and then got to Lila and is like, well, you're actually really more self-actualized and aware than the rest of our siblings. So I even love Lila's only takeaway from it was like, yeah, I'm the best of our siblings. I'm the best of the family. Klaus said it himself. It was like that was our only takeaway. But for him, it's like, I didn't want to go down this cycle again, and you did. And it's like, don't pretend like it was for my sake. It was for your sake, because you need your fuck-up brother to be here, for you to be the superior sibling to come and save us. It's like, well, I'm not going to be that person for you anymore. It's like, I didn't want this. I've spent so long, so many years of trying to be sober, considering, like, we know all the crap that Klaus has been through. Like, all the siblings have had their own respective hells they were put through because of their father. And it's like all of that, so the drugs, the sex. I mean, that clouded Klaus's life for so many years, and now it's like you finally kind of have some clarity, and it's like, yes, I might be a little like kooky or whatever, but the fact of the matter is I was content and I was happy, and you kind of took that away because it's like, right, you needed me broken so that you can try and fix me, because you need a project so you don't have to focus on yourself. So Klaus ends up bouncing after everything. And Allison was like, cool, does anyone else want to get some shit off their chest? You know, and she's like, I'm tired of playing the villain in the family. It's like, to be fair, like, Victor kind of, like, had that role, you know, post, you know, season 1/season 2. It still kind of fell on Victor because of season 3, because of the whole Harlan and everything. So I mean, to be fair, you did some pretty villainous stuff last season, Allison, but it's like, right, like, that's why you were kind of avoiding being around your family, because you knew, like, well, I kind of teamed up with Dad, which is kind of like the biggest no-no you could do in this family. But yeah, so it's complicated, but her being like, yeah, I don't want to be the villain of the family anymore. I'm done playing the villain. And it's like, well, in Klaus's eyes, you still kind of are. So it wasn't just Klaus that bounced. It feels poetic that, even though they didn't go together, that the fact is that Ben went off on his own too, because it's like, right, I'm going to save Jennifer on my own. Like, this family is hogwash, because to be told, they're not his family. It's just like, I'm stuck with you because my other family is gone and I can't get them back. You're all I have in this universe. So it's like, once again, you want me to play the role of your Ben, but I'm not your Ben, and you're not my Sparrows. I have no true allegiances to the Umbrella Academy, because he kind of goes back and forth, because he wanted to help them, because he does feel indebted, because he's like, they are the only family he's got, the closest thing he's got to family, and they kind of embrace him as their Ben, even though he's not their Ben. So it's all kinds of fucked. So he's off on his own, which, you know, well, let's start off with the Ben situation really quickly. What's interesting now, like, the aftermath of Jennifer touching him last episode, at first I was wondering, like, is that eroding him or something? Because it seems like it erodes his skin, and it seems like his body's getting burnt. But we also see the same thing happens to Jennifer, and you're like, what is that? What does that represent? And we find out these two characters are bound together. We'll focus on that when I talk about the other side of the episode. But talking about Ben, he is kind of tracking her down, and lo and behold, who does he run into? Sai. And I'm like, Sai's telling him to go find Jennifer. I'm like, wait, so you're not connected to Jean and Jean? But then I'm like, later on, Jean and Jean seem like they want Ben and Jennifer to be together, because maybe whatever went down in the past, because we don't know the history there, maybe whatever went down in the past, it was like it's such a weird pull I'm gonna make, so stick with me. It's just it's the best analogy I could go for, or a parallel. It feels like it's almost like, if you're familiar with Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, they were trying to make, Xehanort was trying to make the Keyblade, you know, saying it out loud, it won't, he was trying to make the X-Blade, it's just easier that way, you know, just to say that, and he ended up splitting Ventus into Ventus and Vanitas. Vanitas represented all the darkness in Ventus. So, what if, like, Ben and Jennifer kind of have a similar, I don't know if symbiotic would be like the appropriate term, but kind of a similar, like, they are two sides of the same coin, and maybe their attempt to merge in the past is what led to the quote-unquote Jennifer incident that led to Ben dying, and now it's about trying to correct that now. Like, it didn't work before, but it can work now. Maybe that's the justification for it. You know, once again, I was going to say, like, talk about it. We'll still talk about it even more, but when we talk about the other side of the thing. But it's like, it seems like Jean and Jean let them go and killed their guys that were trying to shoot. It's like, well, we can't have them shooting at them. It's like, well, we got to make it seem like they're in danger, like, oh, they're escaping us. But they set all this in motion. So that makes me go, like, so is Sai part of the Keepers? Like, are they, like, the true heart of the Keepers, or are the Keepers as a whole, like, some bullshit organization they concocted just to set all this in motion? I doubt it. Like, I think they might be the true Keepers of the Keepers. Kind of like how, like, it's another weird parallel to pull from, like, the Timekeepers in Loki. When you find out the truth about them, like, it's kind of, spoilers, a facade. Like, maybe that's what the Keepers are supposed to be. Like, this is the true face of the Keepers, or maybe it's, like I said, just all bullshit. That's where I'm just like, I'm not sure where Sai fits in all of this. Because that, and Jean and Jean's reaction makes me feel like that's, because at first I was like, are we dealing with 3 different groups then? So are we dealing with like the keepers? Sai belongs to somebody else, and then we have like Reginald's side of things, or like I was saying, like is he actually with the keepers and he pushed Ben to go find Jennifer? I don't know. He did rescue her after he proceeded to rip through all of the keepers like armored like force. He ripped people in half, tossed that last dude into the damn depths of the forest. So I mean, obviously he's super dead. I thought it was interesting when they ended up making Jennifer confront the squid. For whatever, I guess maybe her memories were messed with too, just like the rest of the siblings. So, but that begs the question, how is that possible considering, like, well, we find out later on that the Umbrella Academy's memories were messed with, but, like, why would Jennifer's be messed with considering, like, but obviously she's from the original timeline, so her memories could have been messed with then, and just, like, they had no, like, makes you wonder where was Jennifer in the original timeline then? I mean, I guess it's kind of a moot point considering the world came to an end because of Victor, you know? So maybe that was all kind of a moot point at that time. So it's that thing of, is the world coming to an end kind of what saved the world from an even bigger threat or issue that could have been this whole cleanse situation? I don't know. Like, sadly, that the apocalypse is the true route that things are supposed to go, and that's the lesser of two evils of what could have been, or routes that life could have taken if things had continued down their natural progression and natural path. I'm just spitballing stuff here because it's like it could, like, because that's my only thing of like why, because Jennifer doesn't remember the squid until she doesn't remember this cleansing stuff or anything like that. But it makes you wonder, like, does that mean everyone else's memories were wiped too, or like was it like a large scale memory wipe? Because like she came out of the squid and you thought that would draw it, but I guess it's like we saw Reginald was there, so he probably snatched her up, maybe paid off people to pretend like none of that happened, and even if it did happen, like I said, this is the original timeline. Like, none of that would matter here, but it's like, well, why wasn't that a known thing in the original timeline? Like I said, maybe he paid people off just like he paid off, like, all the parents so that he could get, you know, the OG, you know, Umbrella Academy. But my point is, like, it wasn't until she saw the squid that, like, it triggered something in her. I don't know if her memories fully came back, but in that moment, she reacted because she was like, no, like, I guess it all potentially came flooding back, whatever block might have been there. It could also just be like a traumatic block. It might not have necessarily needed, like, Reginald to, like, mess with her head for her to forget. It could just be a traumatic block. I don't know. That's kind of persisted over the course of a timeline. I mean, to be fair, like, with a new timeline, she got new memories, and now, just like the Keepers and other people are remembering the original timeline, now she's remembering as well. Or at least some timeline. It doesn't have to necessarily be the original timeline. But to be fair, it's like, well, we are really only dealing with two timelines here, because it's not like, I was like, yeah, we're not dealing with like a multitude. We're only dealing with the original timeline, the timeline that came about because they were in the 60s, which is like, you know, which is season 3. So it's only two timelines we are really dealing with. So going over to the Umbrella Academy themselves, the team is ultimately splitting up because part of the team is going to investigate Gene and Jane, and the other is going to go talk to their dad. You know, now those are the only options kind of available to them. It's like, well, there's bad and then there's worse when it comes to like having to talk to their dad. But Diego ended up finding out the truth about Lila, and I guess in my head it never correlated in my head that I thought she was just doing that on her own. I didn't realize she was actually working with the CIA. Considering everything, it's like, well, it makes perfect sense that it would be Five and her. Like, I guess Five always knew she was working with the CIA, but, like, this was his case, and he wasn't expecting her to be on top of it. Like, I thought Lila was just doing that on her own. I didn't know she was a company woman. I didn't realize that. Which is so interesting, too, considering Diego... I did let that slip my mind that Diego has been trying to get Five to hand his resume over to the CIA and stuff. And I'm wondering why he didn't do that. It's just because it's like, well, Diego's not Diego anymore, so I'm not going to put my neck out there to, like, well, Well, maybe that's also why now in retrospect is like because he knew Lila was part of this CIA, and it's like, well, maybe I put your resume out there, but they were more interested in Lila than you, and that probably would have been a whole blow to your ego. So maybe there's a little bit of that, but now it's like, okay, now it's like, oh, finding out, okay, you're not having an affair with me because the person that the Greek guy with the mustache was my little brother and I didn't recognize it. Well, he's technically your older brother now, but, it's still technically your little brother, whatever the case may be. But for her, it's like the reason why she lied about this is like she needed something for herself away from being a wife, about being a mother. It's just like the whole, as I figured as much, the paternal life was just like, it's just like there's no fun and excitement anymore. Which Diego's like, yeah, I get that too. He's like, I'm sorry that our life is so like stale and boring. He's like, I would like to go out there, bust some skull opens and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, I work day in and day out to protect his family. And the fact of the matter is, it just seems like I'm fighting for a marriage that you're not. And she's kind of like, oh, that's not what I meant, like, that our life isn't great. It's like, And it's like, the fact that you're sneaking behind Diego's back to do it is kind of like that thing, too. So that just sticks the knife in deeper. He ends up, discovering, he ends up being the one that kind of finds the evidence they need when they're checking out Gene and Jean's place. Because he's like, right, they left in a hurry, so check the trash, and he found some files, which kind of busted this whole situation wide open. I mean, it makes sense. He's very much kind of like he can be an idiot sometimes, but he is good. He did the whole vigilante thing, obviously, like away from like the Umbrella Academy. He worked with the cops, worked with a detective in particular, so he knows what he's doing. Like he can do his thing from time to time. Lila and Five, it feels so befitting that Lila's like, oh, let's go on the train, even though Five's like, we don't know how this whole thing works. And she was fine because she's like, oh, adventure, So it's like, let's leave like boring Diego behind for right now. Funny enough, this timeline they ended up being the original timeline. So it does seem like there are multiple timelines bleeding over. Considering, it's like, that had to, I was about to say, I'm stupid, sorry. Like, because I was about to say, that had to be the season 3 timeline that they were in, that he was in last episode. And now he's in the Apocalypse timeline. In fact, he got shot, him and Lila got shot at by his future self. I'm like, it's funny that interestingly enough, Five has had to deal with future him, a future version of himself. Well, technically it's like, versions of these are past hymns from the future because he had to deal with the grassy knoll hymn from season 2, but that was like past him because that was him before he went back in time to the the Umbrella Academy, or was kind of forced to by future Five, and now it's like that's Five's future self, but really it's his past self because that's him. Like, oh god, it's so confusing when I explain it like that, but you get what I'm saying. It's just Five's out from like the Apocalypse future. It's just interesting that Five has to kind of deal with his past selves, who are kind of his future self in some regards. It's just interesting how that all works out. It's like the second time. Well, it's kind of nice and actually really sad when you see like, oh, was it Doris or Dolores, his significant other? I don't remember if that was his wife, the mannequin. I don't remember if that was his wife or just his girlfriend. Whatever the case, maybe you saw her in the background of like the Apocalypse, him shooting at them. So they made it back. And that's where we found out about this all connecting to Ben's death. Which even I had to go for a second. I was like, did they ever explain how Ben died? I was like, I don't think they did. I was like, I felt stupid because I was like, maybe they did. But it turns out they didn't because none of them actually, and I love them making a plot point of that. Because we haven't talked about Ben's death since season 1. Like when you kind of got to know more about the Hargraves family and you found out about Ben's death. It's like, I was like, we never really covered that more about like what actually happened to Ben. It was just kind of like, it was just a thing that was kind of, oh yeah, a tragic accident happened and that was it. And I love that, again, they're programmed to have a set response. And obviously Five wasn't there and neither was Victor at the time, so neither one of them have had their brains scrambled because of that. But I love like taking that thread and bringing it back, and it turns out that what the Jennifer incident is what led to Ben's death. So that's so fascinating to kind of bring that around. What's also interesting too to think about is like, why didn't Ben ever bring this up to Klaus? It's like, well, to be fair, Klaus was like always high all the time. You could always retroactively change that where it's like, well, you could also make it like their Ben was like death, ghost wise, death can be traumatic, so like you might block how you actually are. So even Ben probably didn't remember, because it's like, yeah, that never came up in the 2 seasons he was kicking, well, the years he was kicking it with Klaus. But to be fair, his siblings thought he was out of his mind, being like, oh yeah, Ben's here. But it's like, plus Klaus was like the fuck up of the family. He's high all the time. No one thought anything of it. So plus, even if he told Klaus probably wouldn't remember or blocked it out. Funny enough, all this is happening while Klaus is away right now too. So that's interesting. Either way, our trio of Luther, Allison, and Victor go to their dad. And so it turns out Victor's a little more gung-ho about, not gung-ho, but more okay with visiting their dad, because it's like, Victor's like, I'm stuck. And it's like, I've basically been stuck in this argument with dad for the past like couple years, and it's just like, I probably won't get any clarity, no way to move forward until I confront him. With Luther's like, I totally get that. But Allison had to be like, yeah, but the last time you confronted dad about, his bullshit, he murdered you. And it's like, oh, that's not going to happen again. And he's like, it's not going to happen again, right? It's like, well, what the fuck are you asking them? That your dad's unpredictable. He's an asshole, so there's a slight chance, but I guess I was about to say, like, that's Victor's trauma, but it's like, once again, that's all of their trauma. They're all dad and mom issues, like, riddled, and it's like none of them have been able to kind of, like, move forward because of all that, I mean, if fair, Klaus got a lot of clarity last season, because he met his biological mom last season, if I remember correctly, didn't he? So he has like a lot more clarity on things than the rest. I mean, is that thing of death kind of brought him clarity, interestingly enough. But either way, our trio ends up meeting Mama Hargraves, and she's so ecstatic to meet each of them. And it's like, oh yeah, you're she's like, I want to thank you, Luther, for protecting me all those years, like looking after me, my space boy. And he's like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. I was like, did Reginald reveal to? I feel like I remember Reginald did bring that up of like, Luther, I had you on the moon not just for any reason. I had you up there protecting the most important thing in the world to me. I'm like, I don't know if he ever expressly explained that was like his wife. I don't remember him explaining that, but I feel like I have a vague memory of that. I don't think I talked about it. It was like, I didn't have a chance to rewatch season 3, and obviously it's been a while since I've seen season 1 or 2, so I don't remember. But I'm about to say, is this the first time Luther's hearing that? But I feel like I have a vague memory of, no, I think Reginald's mentioned that before, but I don't know if he ever went into specifics about who or what the circumstances were that Luther was. I mean, obviously for a very long time, Luther had no idea he was going to. He thought he was going to the moon for bullshit. I mean, we found out later on, thinking it was all bullshit. Like the reports were, Dad just kept the letters and it was nothing. But it's like, well, no, there was something really important you were protecting for him. It's just, either way. It's also got to be interesting for them to see their dad in a new light. I mean, to be fair, in season 3, he was like a slightly different version of the asshole they knew. So that's how he presented at first, at the very least. But he's so like, as Allison put it, it's like, oh, we know who wears the monocle in this relationship. She asked him something, and he's like calm and not his typical douchebag self. So he explains, like, to Jennifer of it all, was like, right, we're meant to protect her. She's the opposite of you guys. She's more powerful than all of you put together. Then Diego, Lila, and Five show up to be like, yo, what's up with all this? You messed with our memories. Which he's like, I didn't do such thing. Another version of me did. But he's like, in all honesty, it sounds like something I would do. And it's like, well, at least you have the wherewithal to realize that sounds like a dickish enough thing for me to do. So he's going to restore their memories, but it needs to be all of them. And even Victor's like, no, I want to be a part of this. I, for so long, had never felt like part of the team. And in, like, season 2, I think, is where Victor found their stride to be a part of the team. And now it's like, right, I want to be a part of this too. I need to be a part of finding out the truth about what happened to, especially with everything that went down. It also feels poetic too because let's not forget, like, Ben's the one that saved Victor in season 2, and was like, oh, when I'm sitting here thinking about it, I was like, oh, it's such a beautiful moment, that last moment between Ben and Victor, and it's just like, oh yeah, like, I want to hug my sibling. I'm like, oh my god, I'm getting weepy thinking about it. But it's like, it feels poetic for Victor to probably also plays a role in why Victor wants to do this, to find out what happened to Ben, because Ben was there for him when he needed him. So we won't find out what they end up discovering until next episode, so that's going to be interesting. And then on the flip side of things, we have Klaus, which is so heartbreaking seeing him just kind of breaking into the house and stealing stuff and money, and Claire having to see him like that. I wonder, had Claire, like, well, I don't remember if Claire really had too much of an interaction with, like, her family too much, because I'm sure Allison kept her distance over the years and stuff like that, especially post everything. As the family drifted apart. But, you know, I'm sure she was there through some of the rough patch, because Klaus was living with her for 5 years and he's only been sober for 3. So Claire probably has seen some of the uglier sides before now, like even before the time skip, but like in general, like whenever she was probably maybe around Klaus, but even more so now. But he's been such a good uncle to her. Like, once again, like, where her relationship with her mom has soured tremendously, her and Klaus have had a really good relationship. And it's like, yeah, he's overprotective and stuff, but he's kind of still been there for her, I think, in ways her own mom hadn't been. And so to see him like this, she's like, no, like, come on, we'll talk this out. And he's like, no, it's too late. He's doing everything he can to push her away, even though he does care. He's like, oh, watch out for your feet. Don't step on the glass. That would be bad. But he's still just kind of like, no, it's too late. I already feel it coming into me. Like, I'm a lost cause. Just give up on me. Just leave me alone. It's too late. It's easier to submit because he knows who he is and he's already feeling the tug and pull just so easily with his powers back. It just feels like he feels the old Klaus is there. He's able to kind of lock that side of himself away, but it feels like the cell doors have finally been opened because of what, once again, not on Allison. She poured it directly, but it was a family decision. So it is sad she kind of gets the brunt of that, but it's like, it kind of plays into a deeper dynamic between them that was kind of not spoken about. It was there, just neither wanted to kind of acknowledge, like, the truth of their dynamic. And you know, it's easy and to look at things through such a negative lens when you are so heartbroken and so upset and so broken right now yourself. So he ends up coming across his drug dealer, who's like, yo, you owe me $40K. And he's just, Klaus is looking for, just like, yeah, just go ahead and kill me. And Quinn ends up headshotting him, and he survives. And it's like, well, which is interesting, bringing, like, the Misfits comparison back. Spoilers, because it's a spoiler for Misfits, but, like, his character Nathan, his superpower was immortality. He died very brutal ways and just come back to life very similarly. So it's like, oh, it feels a little kind of wink and nodish there. I don't know if that's what that is, or whether that's just like, because I don't know, like, how far this is pulled away from the comics when it comes to storyline wise. I don't know how far this is drifted away, and whether some of the power situations, like, does Klaus's powers eventually get to this point in the comics or not? But it just, and like I said, it could just been like a wink and nod to, like, some wink and nod to Misfits in that capacity, you know. But as a Misfits fan, maybe I'm just reading way too much into it. But yeah, Quinn takes him and is like, yo, I figure I can do something. I can pay back. I know how you can pay me back that 40 grand you owe me. And so my mind immediately goes to another spoiler. So I won't go into details, but if you've seen the show Preacher, the TV show Preacher, what happens to Cassidy in the final season, season 4, poetically enough, I'm like, maybe it's a similar thing. I mean, for one, it's not going to be that. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Cassidy gets his foreskin cut off all the time. He's a vampire. It constantly regenerates, and they use it for, like, lotion, I believe. Was it baby lotion? I don't remember what product they were putting his foreskin in. But yeah, that was that. This show is not going to be that fucking wild with it, but it probably is going to be a thing of he's probably going to cut out and sell pieces of Klaus, like his organs or whatever, probably seems like, well, if you can come back to life, you'll probably like maybe regrow an organ. Like I could see that being a thing. Which Greek god had to deal with that? Like once you're being strapped to a boulder and like a vulture or something's eating your liver every day and it grows bad. I forgot what fucking Greek god that is. Off the top of my head, I was like, not unless there's like a parallel in that capacity. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where that goes, where all of this ultimately ends up taking us as we enter the back half of the season. It's going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.